Marcus Wellington felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. The cleaning lady's words echoed through the silent hallway of the Boston mansion, shattering the serenity of the luxurious setting. The portrait of the boy hanging on the wall was an identical copy of his brother who disappeared over 30 years ago. A knot tightened in his throat. The boy in the portrait had the same innocent look, the same haircut, the same air of purity he vaguely remembered from childhood. The cleaning lady trembled, trying to hold back tears. "I knew him by the name David," she said, voice breaking. "But he never talked about his family." Marcus slowly approached. The air seemed denser, as if the past were returning in the form of living memory. That portrait had hung in that same spot for decades, a constant reminder of his greatest failure. Marcus Wellington was a man accustomed to the silence of his own achievements. Heir to a fortune in real estate development, he lived between contracts, business dinners, and a loneliness that not even the applause of success could disguise. But there was an old pain that no wealth could heal: the loss of his younger brother Jordan, kidnapped at age 4. The case shook the entire Wellington family. His father, an influential corporate attorney, and his mother, a classical pianist, did everything to find the boy. The police mobilized teams, helicopters, search dogs. There were months of searches, promises, and false leads. Nothing. The kidnapping happened on a Sunday morning during a visit to Central Park. The family's nanny was distracted for just a few minutes, and the boy vanished among the trees and crowds. When Marcus, then 8 years old, learned the news, he swore he'd bring his brother back one day. The years passed, and the tragedy became taboo within the house. His mother fell ill with grief, his father buried himself in work, and Marcus grew up carrying the weight of a promise he could never fulfill. The photo of the missing boy remained on top of the grand piano in the living room, yellowed by time. Until that afternoon. The new cleaning lady, Shanice, had started working just 2 weeks ago. A young black woman from the South, she was discreet, polite, and always had a look that seemed to hold a secret. Marcus barely noticed her presence until the moment he found her standing frozen before his brother's old portrait. She was trembling, eyes brimming with tears, murmuring something inaudible. "Is something wrong?" he asked, curious. Shanice turned slowly, her expression frightened. "Sir, this boy, he lived with me at the orphanage until he was 14. Marcus thought he'd heard wrong. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "His name was David. He said he'd been taken from a wealthy family, but nobody believed him. They thought it was a child's imagination. I grew up alongside him. He protected me." Marcus's heart raced. "Are you saying this boy, David, was my brother?" Shanice nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I never forgot that face. When I saw this portrait on my first day here, I couldn't believe it. I thought I was seeing things." Marcus stood stunned. It was impossible, or at least it seemed so. His brother had disappeared over 30 years ago. And if the boy really lived until 14, why hadn't anyone found him? Shanice told what she knew. David had been left at St. Vincent's Orphanage in upstate New York at age 6, brought by a social worker after the death of his adoptive parents in a car accident. The document said he was an orphan since infancy, but David, in his innocence, always talked about a house with a garden, a grand piano, and an older brother who called him Champ. "He talked about it all the time," Shanice said. "Nobody believed him. I believed him." Marcus asked her to tell everything, every detail. Shanice remembered that David was very intelligent, had a talent for drawing, and sometimes cried when watching news reports about missing children. He believed that one day he'd be found. But at 14, after a fight at the orphanage, he ran away. Nobody heard from him again. Marcus walked to the portrait. The painting had been done months before the kidnapping, and the artist perfectly captured the serene look of young Jordan. Memories came back like a whirlwind, the two playing ball in the garden, his brother's laughter, their mother's voice singing at the piano. He felt the weight of absence as if time had never passed. He was determined to discover the truth. The next day, he hired a private investigator and asked Shanice to accompany him to the orphanage. The building still existed but was in poor condition, an old brick structure with boarded windows and peeling paint, barely standing in a forgotten neighborhood. An elderly nun, Sister Margaret, received them kindly. When Marcus showed her the portrait, the woman turned pale. "My God, little David. Yes, I remember him. A sweet boy, obedient, always drawing." Marcus showed documents from the time of the kidnapping and noticed something disturbing. The date David arrived at the orphanage coincided exactly with the period when the searches for his brother ceased. The trail had gone cold, and everyone assumed Jordan was dead. How did he end up here? Marcus asked, voice tight. The nun explained that the boy was brought by a woman identified as a state social worker, with documents and a false birth certificate. She claimed the parents had died and the child had no relatives. The orphanage accepted it without investigation. The country was going through a social crisis, and there were hundreds of similar cases. Marcus felt rage and helplessness. Everything made sense. The kidnapping, the sudden disappearance of clues, the apparent death of adoptive parents, it was all connected. His brother had been just miles from home, forgotten by human failures and neglect of authorities. Shanice watched in silence, clutching the yellow gloves she still carried in her apron pockets. This was more than a revelation. It was a reunion with a past both had lost. As they talked, the nun mentioned something that made Marcus freeze. Before running away, David left a drawing. He said if anyone ever found him, they'd know who he was. The drawing was kept in an old folder. It showed a large house, a grand piano, and two boys holding hands. In the corner, in childish letters, was written, "I am Jordan Wellington. One day my brother will find me." Marcus couldn't hold back tears. Shanice cried too. "He always said that," she whispered. "Every single day." Back at the mansion, Marcus placed the drawing next to the portrait. The resemblance was undeniable. Now only one thing remained: discovering what happened to David after he ran away. He hired a team of international investigators, reviewed old files, cross-referenced missing persons data. Each lead seemed to hit a dead end, until a name appeared in a shelter registry in another state. David Jordan Wellington. Admitted at 17 after being found injured on a highway. Marcus traveled there immediately. He discovered the young man had been hospitalized for 3 months and then disappeared again. There was a blurry photo in the files, but the look was the same, those Wellington eyes, unmistakable. Shanice accompanied every step, emotional. "I looked for him for years," she confessed. "But I never had the courage to talk to anyone. I thought I'd never see him again." Marcus held her hands. "You heard him, Shanice. You were the only witness to what happened to my brother." She smiled sadly. "I was just a girl, sir. But he taught me what hope is." Night fell over the mansion. The boy's portrait seemed to watch them, silent, as if waiting for the past to finally be corrected. Marcus promised he wouldn't rest until he found the truth. And in that promise was more than a search for justice. There was the desire to unite the lost pieces of two lives marked by absence, that of the missing boy and the woman who loved him like a brother. In the following days, Marcus Wellington dove body and soul into the investigation. The case, forgotten for decades by newspapers and police, began taking shape before his eyes. Forged documents, false names, illegal adoption records, everything pointed to a child trafficking network operating discreetly between orphanages and wealthy families who couldn't adopt through legal channels. Jordan's kidnapping had been one of the first victims. Shanice accompanied him silently, reviewing old folders, reading reports, recognizing places. She seemed to feel each discovery like a wound reopening. At night, they sat in the mansion's office, among stacks of papers and memories. With each new clue, the face in the portrait seemed to come alive, as if the boy were somehow guiding them. One dawn, one of the investigators called Marcus. "We found something." A medical record of a man admitted in 2012 under the name David Jordan. He was 30 years old. Suffered an accident and was hospitalized at a public hospital in Philadelphia. Marcus and Shanice traveled that same day. At the hospital, they were led to the archives department. An elderly doctor who'd worked there for decades received them. "I remember him well," the doctor said. "He was brought in without documents. Suffered from partial amnesia. Stayed hospitalized for a few months, then disappeared." The doctor said the man was calm, spoke little, but drew with perfection. Had an artist's talent. Made portraits of children all the time. Marcus, heart racing, asked if there were any drawings saved. The man opened an old drawer and pulled out a yellowed folder. Inside were several sheets, and on one of them, a clear drawing of a piano and two boys holding hands. Shanice covered her mouth. He never forgot. The doctor then revealed something even more surprising. Before leaving, he left an address saying he needed to visit an old orphanage in upstate New York. After that, we never heard from him again. Marcus and Shanice returned to the town where it all began. The orphanage, now abandoned, was a ruin covered in ivy and silence. They entered with flashlights. The floor creaked, windows banged in the wind, as if the past were claiming presence. In the old boys' dormitory, Shanice stopped before a wall covered in scribbles. Among them, one drawing stood out: a house, a piano, and the phrase, "I came back but nobody was waiting for me." Shanice began to cry. "He was here, Marcus. He came back." Marcus knelt before the wall, touching the lines with trembling fingers. "And we never knew." That simple, devastating phrase made the millionaire realize the extent of the loss. It wasn't just his brother who'd disappeared. It was an entire lifetime of affection, a bond broken by neglect and destiny. But there was still hope. One of the investigators found a recent record of a street artist using the name Jordan Wellington at craft fairs in rural Pennsylvania. The man was described as calm, introspective, and sold handmade children's portraits. Marcus and Shanice immediately headed there. They arrived at a small town surrounded by mountains. In the center, a colorful fair was happening under the afternoon sun. Among stalls and laughter, Shanice saw him first. A man with a short beard, simple clothes, painting a little girl's portrait with delicate brushstrokes. The concentrated look, the serene posture, there was something familiar and painfully recognizable. Shanice approached slowly. "David." He looked up. For an instant, the world seemed to stop. His expression was one of shock and confusion. Then, emotion. "I know you," he murmured hesitantly. "From the orphanage." "Shanice." She began to cry. "Yes. It's you. It's really you." Marcus approached, heart pounding. "Jordan," he said, voice choked. The man turned pale. "Jordan," he repeated, confused. Marcus pulled the old drawing from his pocket. "You made this. It was your way of remembering us." David's eyes filled with tears. He took the drawing with trembling hands, and as if something inside him unlocked, he began to cry. "I dreamed about this house, this piano, about a brother who promised to find me." Marcus hugged him tightly. "I never gave up on you. Never." People at the fair stopped to watch, not understanding. Two grown men embracing as if trying to recover an entire stolen lifetime. Shanice cried, smiling. It was as if time had finally returned what fate had taken from them. In the following days, Jordan was taken to medical examinations and consultations. Doctors confirmed he suffered from deep traumas and memory blocks, resulting from violent changes in childhood and the accident that nearly killed him. But gradually, memories began returning: the smell of the piano, the garden of the house, their mother's face. Back at the mansion, Jordan walked through the hallways like someone visiting an old dream. He stopped before the portrait, the same one he'd unconsciously recognized in his memories. He looked at Shanice and Marcus. "I thought you'd forgotten me." Marcus smiled through tears. "Never. I searched for you my entire life." Shanice, emotional, added, "He waited for you in every stroke, in every memory." Jordan began living temporarily at the mansion, surrounded by care. The nights were long but filled with conversations that seemed to heal old wounds. Shanice became the link between the two brothers, remembering details of the lost childhood and moments at the orphanage. One day, while opening an old box of correspondence, Marcus found a yellowed letter their mother had left before dying. "If destiny ever brings Jordan back, tell him the piano still waits for him, that love never forgets." Marcus showed the letter to his brother, who smiled through tears. "Mom always played Chopin. Remember?" Marcus nodded. "I remember." She said every note was a prayer. That night, the two sat before the dust-covered piano. Marcus played the first notes, trembling and emotional. Jordan accompanied him, improvising like when they were children. And for the first time in 30 years, the sound of the piano filled the mansion. Shanice watched from the doorway, heart light. She knew this moment wasn't just a reunion of brothers, it was the rebirth of an entire family. But there was still one last revelation. Days later, while reviewing old files, Marcus discovered the name of the woman who delivered Jordan to the orphanage with false documents. She was a nurse named Teresa Blackwell who'd worked in private hospitals at the time. A quick investigation revealed she'd been paid by a wealthy couple who couldn't have children. The intention was never to hurt the boy, but to raise him as their own. However, fate intervened with the adoptive parents' fatal accident, leaving young David orphaned once again, this time with no way back to his real family. Marcus decided not to seek revenge. The past has already taken enough, he said. Instead, he created a foundation named after his mother, dedicated to locating missing children and supporting orphanages across America. Shanice was appointed coordinator, the woman who'd kept a child's memory alive when the world tried to erase it. Jordan, now a recognized artist, painted the institution's logo, two boys holding hands before a grand piano. On Inauguration Day, reporters and guests filled the main hall. Marcus took the stage and said, "This story began with a promise. A brother promised to find the other, and a woman with a pure heart kept alive the memory of what the world tried to erase. Today we transform pain into hope. Today we make sure no child is forgotten." Jordan hugged him before everyone. "Love found us, Marcus. Even after everything." Shanice, in tears, looked at the portrait hanging on the wall, the same one that started it all. Now it seemed to smile. The foundation began operating immediately. In the first year, they reunited 12 families. In the second, 23. They established partnerships with police departments, implemented facial recognition technology, created a national database of missing children. Jordan became the face of the campaign, sharing his story in schools, churches, and community centers. His testimony was powerful, a living example that hope should never die. "I was lost for 30 years, he'd say. But someone never stopped looking. Someone never stopped believing. If you're searching for someone, don't give up. And if you're lost, know that someone is looking for you." Shanice ran the foundation with fierce dedication. She understood what it meant to be forgotten, to be invisible. Every child they found was a victory against the system that had failed them all. Marcus, for his first time in his life, felt his wealth had true purpose. He'd built an empire, but only now was he building a legacy. One evening, the three of them sat in the mansion's garden, the same garden where Jordan and Marcus had played as children. "Do you remember this place?" Marcus asked. Jordan closed his eyes. "I'm starting to. I remember. A treehouse. Right there." He pointed to an old oak. "We built it together," Marcus said. "Dad helped. You fell and scraped your knee, and Mom kissed it better." Jordan smiled, tears in his eyes. "I'm remembering. Slowly, but I'm remembering." Shanice watched them, feeling privileged to witness this healing. She thought about all the children still lost, all the families still searching. The work was far from over. "We need to expand," she said. "There are so many more children out there." Marcus nodded. "We will. We'll reach every state, every city. No child will be forgotten. Not on our watch." Jordan picked up his sketchbook. He always carried one now. He began drawing, the three of them in the garden, the mansion behind them, the old oak tree standing guard. "This is family," he said softly. "Not just blood. It's the people who refuse to let you disappear." As months turned into years, the Wellington Foundation became a national force for change. They didn't just search for missing children, they reformed the system that allowed children to disappear in the first place. Marcus used his business connections to push legislation. Shanice built grassroots networks in communities where children were most vulnerable. Jordan gave the movement its soul, its human face. But the work took its toll. Late one night, Marcus found Shanice crying in the foundation's office, surrounded by case files. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. She looked up, exhausted. "We found another one today. A boy, 8 years old. He'd been missing for 3 years. And when we found him..." She couldn't finish. Marcus sat beside her. "I know. The happy reunions are what we show the world. But we see the other side too. The ones we find too late. The ones we don't find at all." "How do you keep going?" she asked. "How do you carry this weight?" "By remembering Jordan," he said. "For 30 years, I carried the weight of losing him. That was unbearable. This weight, the weight of trying to help, this I can bear. Because now I'm doing something." Shanice wiped her tears. You're right. I see David in every missing child. I see myself in every scared kid at every orphanage. That's what makes you perfect for this work, Marcus said. You understand. You remember. You refuse to let them be invisible. The Foundation's success brought challenges too. Copycat organizations emerged, some fraudulent. They had to be vigilant, protecting their reputation and their mission. One case particularly haunted them. A teenager claimed to be a missing child from 15 years ago. The family was desperate to believe it. DNA tests proved it wasn't him. He was a con artist exploiting their grief. Marcus had to tell the family. He'd never forget the mother's face when she realized it wasn't her son. The hope dying in her eyes. This is the cruelest part, he told Jordan later. Not the children we can't find. It's the false hope. The almost moments. Jordan understood. He'd lived through his own almost moments, times when he almost remembered, almost found his way home, almost reconnected with his past. But we did find each other, Jordan reminded him. That has to count for something. That has to give other families hope. The Foundation's third anniversary was marked by a major victory. They'd successfully lobbied for the National Child Recovery Act, requiring better coordination between agencies, mandatory DNA databases for unidentified children, and stricter penalties for falsifying adoption documents. At the ceremony, Shanice stood beside the governor as he signed the bill into law. She thought about the little girl she'd been at St. Vincent's, scared, alone, invisible. That little girl would never have imagined this moment. Later, at the celebration, a woman approached her. Ms. Bennett? I wanted to thank you. You found my daughter 2 years ago. She's thriving now. She's happy. She remembers nothing of those years she was gone, and I'm grateful for that. Shanice hugged her. These moments made everything worthwhile. But not every story had a happy ending. One case broke them all. A 5-year-old boy, missing for 18 months. They'd tracked him through 3 states, followed every lead. When they finally found him, he'd been so traumatized he didn't speak for 6 months. The Foundation paid for his therapy, supported the family. Jordan visited him regularly, drawing with him, communication without words. Slowly, the boy began to heal. And when he finally spoke his first words, they were, "Thank you for finding me." Jordan wept. Marcus wept. Shanice wept. It was why they did this work. The boy's case led them to a larger trafficking ring. Working with the FBI, they brought down an operation that had taken dozens of children. It was the Foundation's biggest success, and the darkest thing they'd ever confronted. How do people do this? Shanice asked after the arrests. How do they steal children, treat them like merchandise? I don't know, Marcus said. I'll never understand it. All we can do is stop as many as we can. As the Foundation's work expanded, Jordan's art evolved. He began painting large murals in cities across America, faces of missing children, some found, some still lost. Each mural included a QR code linking to the Foundation's website. The murals became landmarks, conversation starters. People would stop, scan the code, learn about missing children. Tips poured in. Several cases were solved directly because someone recognized a face in one of Jordan's murals. Art is memory, Jordan explained in an interview. When I was lost, I drew to remember who I was. Now I draw so others won't forget these children. On a quiet Sunday evening, 5 years after their reunion, Marcus, Jordan, and Shanice sat in the mansion's music room. The grand piano gleamed, regularly played now. Jordan had progressed from simple melodies to complex pieces. Muscle memory, the doctors said. His hands remembered what his mind had forgotten. Tonight, he played their mother's favorite Chopin nocturne. Marcus and Shanice listened in silence. When he finished, Jordan turned to them. I remember now. All of it. It took 5 years, but it's all back. Everything. Marcus asked. Everything. The day I was taken. The confusion. The fear. The years of trying to hold on to who I was. And then forgetting. And then you finding me. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. I used to be angry about the lost years. The stolen childhood. The missing decades. But I'm not anymore. Why not? Shanice asked. Because those years led to this. He gestured at the Foundation's latest report on the table, 43 children found in the past year. If I hadn't been lost, we wouldn't be finding all these others. My pain has purpose now. Marcus joined him at the window. Mom would be proud. Of all of us. She is, Jordan said softly. I feel it. Every time we bring a child home, I feel her smile. 10 years after the reunion, the Wellington Foundation had become a national institution. They'd reunited over 500 families, reformed child welfare policies in 30 states, and trained thousands of social workers and law enforcement officers. But success brought unexpected challenges. The Foundation's board suggested Marcus step back, let professional managers take over. He was in his 50s now, could finally enjoy his wealth. Jordan could focus on his art full-time. Shanice could retire, write her memoir. They discussed it over dinner at the mansion, the three of them, as always. They're not wrong, Marcus admitted. We've built something bigger than us. Maybe it's time to let others carry it forward. Shanice shook her head firmly. I didn't survive St. Vincent's to retire at 45. These kids need people who understand. Who remember. I agree, Jordan said. My art is the foundation. They're not separate. Every painting I do raises awareness, brings in donations, keeps the mission alive. Marcus smiled. I was hoping you'd both say that. Because I'm not ready to step back either. There's too much work left to do. They agreed to restructure, bring in professional help, yes, but remain deeply involved. This wasn't just their work. It was their purpose. That same year, Jordan met someone. Her name was Lisa, a trauma therapist who worked with the children they found. She understood his past, never pushed him to remember more than he was ready to share. At their wedding, held in the mansion's garden, Marcus was best man. Shanice was maid of honor, family in every way that mattered. During his speech, Marcus said, 30 years ago, I lost my brother. I spent decades searching. And when I found him, I discovered I'd also found something else, a mission, a purpose, and a sister. He raised his glass to Shanice. Family isn't just who you're born to. It's who refuses to let you disappear. 2 years later, Jordan and Lisa had twins. Boys. They named them Marcus and David, honoring both the brother who never gave up and the identity Jordan carried during his lost years. When Marcus held the babies for the first time, he thought about the little boy who'd vanished in Central Park. About the promise he'd made. About how much had changed. You're uncles now, he told the twins. And you're going to grow up knowing you're never alone. That family means never giving up. The foundation continued growing. They expanded internationally, helping locate missing children in 12 countries. Jordan's murals appeared in London, Paris, Tokyo. Shanice became a sought-after speaker, telling her story and the foundation's mission. But they never forgot where it all started, with a cleaning lady seeing a portrait and having the courage to speak up. On the 20th anniversary of Shanice joining the mansion staff, Marcus threw a celebration. Current and former board members, families they'd helped, staff members, all gathered. Marcus presented Shanice with the Foundation's first Lifetime Achievement Award. 20 years ago, this woman could have stayed silent. She could have ignored what she saw. Instead, she spoke up, and everything changed. Not just for us, but for hundreds of families. Shanice, now in her 40s, addressed the crowd. I was once a scared little girl in an orphanage, convinced the world had forgotten me. David, Jordan, protected me, told me someone would remember. He was right. And now it's our turn to remember all the children still lost. We don't give up. We don't forget. We don't stop looking. The crowd stood, applauding. Among them were dozens of people, now adults, who'd been found by the Foundation as children. Living proof that the work mattered. That night, after everyone left, the three of them sat in the music room one more time. Jordan played the piano. Marcus and Shanice listened. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't taken this job? Marcus asked Shanice. She thought about it. Every day. Jordan would still be lost. You'd still be searching. And I'd still be just surviving instead of living. Funny how life works, Jordan said, finishing the piece. The worst thing that ever happened to me led to the best thing. finding my way home and helping others do the same. Mom's letter was right, Marcus said. Love never forgets. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise over the garden. The grand piano gleamed in the soft light. On the wall, the portrait of 4-year-old Jordan smiled down at them, no longer a symbol of loss but of hope. Years later, when Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep at 78, the foundation continued. Jordan took over as director, with Shanice as eternal co-chair. They'd reunited over 2,000 families by then. At Marcus's funeral, Jordan spoke, "My brother made a promise when he was 8 years old. He kept that promise for 40 years. And because he did, thousands of families have been reunited. His legacy isn't the buildings or the money. It's every child who came home." The foundation still operates today, housed in the old Wellington mansion. Tours are given weekly, always ending in the music room where the grand piano still sits, regularly played. And on the wall, the portrait of a 4-year-old boy who was lost but never forgotten, proof that love, indeed, never forgets. Because sometimes, finding one person changes everything. Sometimes, a cleaning lady's courage rewrites history. And sometimes, 30 years isn't too late to come home.